Hey, thanks for coming to my Luke reunion party. Think of it, just us. The original Luke Skywalker and the 1995 reproduction.
I know, isn't it just the most? We're the only two vintage-style Luke Skywalker figures in existence. You've been like a Hasbro to me.
Thanks, bro. We really are two of a kind.
I know.
Oh, who's that?
Hey, bitches. Sorry I'm late. I had to stop by Tashi Station and pick up some red wine. You guys like Merlot?
Oh, shit.
So who knew at this time that Hasbro was going to decide to have a midlife crisis? That's right, Hasbro, who bought their Kenner label back in 1995 and has been taking over the Star Wars licensing ever since and producing figure after figure after figure, kind of like refining the line as they go along, has just announced that they are, in fact, going to reproduce 6 of the vintage action figures from the original 1978 Kenner line. The new figures include Luke, Leia, Han, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, a Stormtrooper, and a special bonus figure in the previously never produced Grand Moff Tarkin in the style of the old Kenner line, which will come with a reproduction of the Star Wars Death Star game. And Hasbro's decided to call this the new Retro line. It will be available at Target, and it already sold out online at the Target website. But there's more coming. I'm sure they're gonna pump these things out. A little bit of vintage Star Wars trivia. When Han Solo first came out in 1978, they said his head was too big. So they re-sculpted a new Han head and they stuck it on there. So there's what's referred to as a big head Han and a small head Han. So what they're doing is they're making the big head Han in this new retro release. And I think that's a really weird choice. From what I can see, you know, they're going the whole 9 yards. They're doing the retro packaging with the little hanger tag in it. I don't like that they're pre-weathering the packaging. That looks weird. That's like buying pre-ripped jeans, which I just think are one of the dumbest things on the planet. And just so you know, they're not the original figures. They're putting a big old like retro logo on the packaging, and it's not even a sticker. It's printed on there. So you're not getting out of that, folks. Don't try to sell these on eBay as the originals, because we'll catch on. So the big question everyone is asking is, will this new retro Hasbro line wreck the vintage Star Wars? I don't really think it will, because the vintage action line has always commanded a price. You can't get those figures anymore. They were made during a very specific period of time. You know, the figures have stamps in them, and you know what the real deal is. And honestly, any collector really worth their salt pretty much already has all of these. I do collect toys, and I pride myself on my Star Wars vintage collection. I have all my old figures from when I was a little kid. There were very few holes in my collection as I grew into an adult, and I was pretty OCD about my figures. So they all have their weapons, they're all in great shape, and yeah, thanks mental illness. Now, since the special edition releases of the original trilogy, the prices on these toys went up, and they've gone up even more recently. I mean, it used to be that a figure with its gun, with its weapon, would command one price. Now there's a whole market for weapons separate of the figures, and some of the weapons, like for example, the really small gun that comes with an A-wing pilot, that gun I have seen go from anywhere from like $35 to $70 just for the gun, but the figure complete is about $40 to $50 usually. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second and tell you that the vintage Star Wars toy market probably needs a little bit of dose of this, because it'll calm prices down just a little bit. Because people who are on a budget, people who want to be able to afford some of these toys and say, hey, I have some vintage stuff, they can't afford that. I can't afford most of it now. You know, thank God I filled in the holes in my collection when things were still affordable. I mean, that was in the mid to late 90s when I was doing that. So vintage collectors, a little bit kind of brought this on yourselves. Because there are a lot of people out there who will buy these figures and they know they're reproductions. But here is the thing, folks. They're reproductions from the source itself. I mean, this is the official company that has the license to these items making these reproductions. There's no way around it, and that's how it goes. And I don't know if you noticed this or not, but Kenner and Hasbro aren't doing so hot, folks. I'm sure you've been to the toy aisle at your favorite Target or previously opened Toys R Us and noticed there's a lot of Star Wars stuff sitting on the shelves because nobody wants these new characters. Especially, I won't name any names, but I think you might have an idea of who I'm talking about. Anyway, the other thing that's under contention right now is Hasbro going to remake the entire line? I think that they're not, because even in the old line, there are figures that even the original ones don't do well, and complete in good shape, they're only worth like $7 to $10. So if they remade those now, they would just be sitting on the shelves next to you know who, because they're just not that popular. They weren't then and they won't be now. What I really hope they don't do is I hope that they don't remake any of the really rare ones or the variations like Yak Face. That was only released in Europe, in case you didn't know that. And the Blue Snaggletooth, which was a mistake and came with a store-only action set that came with other figures. You could only get it at Sears. Kenner/Hasbro is currently getting its ass kicked by companies like Funko and Super 7 because retro is in. Now the difference is, here's the difference. Funko did things like they created action figure lines for movies that never had them, like Gremlins and Goonies and Flash Gordon and all those fun 80s adventure fantasy films that we never saw realized at toys. And the smart thing that they did was they made them look like they were produced in the 70s and 80s. So that was just like, yes. Another thing is, for collectors, there have already been reproductions on the market for years, and you got to watch out for them. I personally don't really have a problem with reproductions. Only time I have a problem with it is when somebody said, "Hey, this is vintage, the original, and it's fake." I mean, that's a lie, and I'm not okay with that. But if you want to trade in repros and you just want to have a collection, no matter if it's old, new, or a mixture of both, that's totally your business. And you know what my favorite thing about this is? When the movie franchise is in trouble, when the toy line is in trouble, who do they come running to? The old original fans. That's you and that's me, and people who have a passion for this stuff. So when you're feeling blue and you're feeling like Star Wars has forsaken you, it's not true, folks, because when the chips are down, when things really get rough, they turn to us and they rely on us to kind of, buy stuff and go to the movies and things like that. The movies are not in good shape. But this is an interesting move by the toy line because they're acknowledging that we're out here. They're acknowledging that there is a demand for this stuff. Little kids aren't going to buy this stuff. They're out chasing Pokemons. They don't want these simplistic figures just with 5 points of movement. They want the wrist to move. They want the figures to come with like 10 extra sets of hands so you can pose them however you want. Yeah, these aren't for kids. They're not for kids. I want you to say that to yourself. It's okay. They're not for kids. I really don't think they're going to make the whole line, folks. I think they're going to do these 6 plus Tarkin. They'll probably squeeze out a few more that have never been made. Hopefully they'll listen to the fans on that and see if Hasbro will go, oh, yeah, you guys have been wanting these ones for years. Why don't we just finally make them? Just for a little bit of history, I want to tell you that Hasbro has been through a few incarnations with Star Wars figures. In 1995, everybody was jazzed because they were going to start the line all over again and have it re-envisioned. So they put out the Power of the Force line, and what we got was these kind of over bulky versions of all the Star Wars characters. Like Luke was really buff. Like Luke, I was like, when did Luke start doing CrossFit? And Han was all suns out, guns out, and Leia ended up looking like the daughter of the weird military lady from The Fifth Element. And one big mistake they made was they completely redid the figures in a little bit broader scale, but then they started recasting, doing recasts of the ships, but from the original mold. So, we've got the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter and stuff like that were made for the slender, coked out 70s figures. and they don't fit the new figures at all. So then they had to redo the ships down the line. So after they launched the release in 1995, in December of that same year, they released a reproduction 4-pack, and I think it was only at Toys R Us, of Han, Luke, Chewie, and Darth Vader. And those were the only, to that date, the only reproductions ever made of the vintage figures. They were cast off the vintage figures. And you can tell the differences right off the bat. The color is more matted. The colors are a little more muted. The tone of the plastic isn't as shiny. There's a little bit of sizing differences between these two, and the new vintage characters are going to be like that. And you know what's more is that they put peg holes in the feet of the characters, and they don't even fit on the original pegs. So I don't know why they did that. You can tell immediately that they're different. Any good collector knows that. So my point is that they're not a threat to the market, and I don't think these new ones are going to be a threat to the market. And like, this is the repro Darth Vader, and I'm going to put that right in there. Look at that. He has one leg shorter than the other. Remember those little pamphlets at Kenner where we really do care? Well, at Hasbro, we don't care that much unless you're shelling out a lot of money. And speaking of that, Hasbro is also taking up kind of like crowdfunding incentives. It's really weird. I mean, they're a billion-dollar company, and for the first time, they're asking us, what do you want to see? Will you put money into this? That's a really weird move by a toy company, and I don't know how I feel about that. But what I'm not on the fence about is, you may have heard that they in the past year they crowdfunded Jabba's sail barge. I'm not talking about the little ones. I'm talking about the mothership, like the queen bee of the fleet. And I scrimped and I saved and I ordered one because I love Jabba the Hutt. I love Tatooine and all the creatures and everything. And I can't wait to get that and make a video for you. I'm going to unpack it. I'm going to put it together. I'm just going to show it to you. And then I'm probably going to spoon it for about a week. So I think this is an interesting development in Hasbro's trajectory as they try to make up for losses in toy sales from the disastrous recent films, as they try to keep the old fans in the loop and keep us coming back for more. Because whether you want to admit it or not, we're the backbone. We're the backbone, folks. We're who they come running to. I think it's too soon to tell what's going to happen, if this line is going to expand, if they're going to make more and more and more figures. Probably not. My hunch is not. I don't think that the original toys will ever lose their value because there's no more of them. You know, they were made once, they're floating around out there, and you can buy them and sell them, but they never made them again. So there's a finite amount of them. So I don't really think anything is wrecked. I totally get it that some vintage collectors might be, oh man, like Hasbro just took this huge crap all over people who've been putting time and money and effort and passion into this all these years. I think you're okay, folks. Just go on collecting. I think the big takeaway from this is that when the dust settles, Hasbro really does know who to call. So chin up, folks. The fans are not invisible. I had a great time talking about this with you. I can't wait to do more toy videos. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you very soon.